There's this statement that really makes you stop and think, especially if your business runs on tech. If you don't own the infrastructure, you are just a temporary tenant. It's a heavy thought, right? If you're just renting, are you ever really truly in control?
So today, we're going to break down what it takes to flip that script, to go from being a pretty vulnerable tenant on someone else's digital property to becoming the landlord of your own tech destiny. It's a journey from living with constant risk to building real, lasting resilience.
We've all been there. You find a great app, you build your workflow around it, and then, poof, it gets bought out, filled with junk you don't need, or worse, it just vanishes. I mean, think about all those services Google has killed off, or how a platform like Twitter can just become X overnight. The very tools we lean on are feeling more and more like they're built on quicksand.
And all this chaos, well, it's created something called the tenant trap. It's that feeling of being stuck when you've outsourced your core operations to third-party SaaS platforms. But what does that risk actually look like day to day?
It really comes down to three big dangers. First, you've got the acquisition signal. That awesome, lean tool you rely on gets swallowed by a big company, and everything that made it great just disappears. Then there's the sunset risk. If a product isn't a massive home run for the company that owns it, they just shut it down, leaving you completely high and dry. And finally, the walled garden. Your data gets locked in so tight that leaving becomes a nightmare, even if the service starts to suck.
Right, so how do you get out of this trap? Well, it's not about finding a better app. It's about a complete change in how you think. It's about moving from being a passive renter to an active, empowered owner. Let's dig into what that actually means.
And just look at the difference here. It's like two different universes. On one side, you have the tenant mindset. You're basically accepting that you have no control, you're living with that constant risk, you're renting. But on the other side, that's the landlord mindset. You're prioritizing data sovereignty, true resilience, and interoperability. It's all about owning your stack, knowing that the tools you depend on today will absolutely be there for you a decade from now.
Okay, so that's where a practical solution like the E-SPIN Application Appliance series comes into play. It's literally designed to be the bridge for companies that are tired of renting and are finally ready to own.
But here's the thing. Owning isn't a one-size-fits-all deal. The right path for you to become a landlord really depends on what your organization needs, your security requirements, how you need to scale, what kind of tech you're already running.
E-SPIN basically offers two main flavors. First up, you've got the physical appliance. Think of it as your own personal air-gapped fortress. This is a dedicated piece of hardware perfect for folks in military, government, or critical infrastructure who need their data completely isolated from the outside world. Then you've got the virtual appliance, or WARP virtualization. This is a slick, pre-packaged virtual machine you can just drop into your existing private cloud. It's awesome for agile companies that want to slash those SaaS bills. And the benefits for each? They're super clear. With the physical box, you have zero external dependency. There's no remote kill switch some vendor in another country can flip if they decide they don't like you anymore. With the virtual appliance, you get instant scalability, and it just slides right into the VMware or Proxmox setup you already know and love. You get to choose the exact level of control you need.
Okay, so you've picked out your digital real estate. But what's actually inside the box? What are the tools that let you finally say goodbye to those pricey, flaky SaaS subscriptions?
Now this is the real aha moment. The appliance comes loaded with rock-solid open-source standards that can replace the exact tools you're paying for right now. So instead of Confluence or Notion, you get MediaWiki for your knowledge base. Instead of Salesforce, you get vTiger for your CRM. And you can ditch Slack or Teams for Mattermost, a secure chat platform that, by the way, isn't secretly reading your conversations to train its AI.
But, and this is super important, owning your own gear doesn't mean you're left all alone to figure it out. That's a huge point. A box of hardware is pretty much useless if you don't have a solid plan to deploy it, maintain it, and keep it secure for the long haul.
See, E-SPIN wraps this whole thing in what they call a full lifecycle service model. It kicks off with deployment and training, so your team feels totally comfortable. Then it's all about proactive, preventative maintenance. They don't sit around waiting for a fire. And finally, they've got this lifespan strategy, where they actively monitor the hardware's health and give you a heads up when it's time for a trade-up, making sure you're never running on old, failing equipment.
And what does all of this add up to? Well, it's all about one big idea: digital sovereignty. For a company, it just means having total, absolute control over your own data and your own tech. It's how you actually comply with regulations like GDPR or HIPAA, because your data lives where you say it lives, under your rules.
So let's pull all this together.
What really makes this whole approach different from, just calling up a typical vendor and ordering a server?
And this chart, man, it just lays it all out. A typical vendor, their main goal is to sell you a box. End of story. E-SPIN's goal, your business continuity. After-sales support goes from being reactive, call us when it's on fire, to proactive maintenance. And when the hardware gets old, it's not just your problem to solve, it becomes a managed trade-up process. It's a total shift from being a vendor to being a real partner.
When you boil it all down, this is the real promise. It's not about the physical appliance or the software, it's about the outcome. The peace of mind that comes from knowing your most important systems are secure, compliant, and actually built to last.
So we end where we began, with one simple question for you. When you really look at the critical software your business runs on, are you building on solid ground that you own? Or are you just a temporary tenant crossing your fingers and hoping the landlord doesn't decide to change the locks tomorrow? That choice is becoming more critical every single day.